Welcome to Lacan in Scotland. We're pleased to have with us today Richard Leeds. Richard is a filmmaker and may be familiar to viewers of Lacan in Scotland from his previous film, Adieu Lacan. And we're interviewing Richard today on the occasion of his new film, V13. If you're interested in seeing Richard's film, you can view it online. If you click on the link below to Richard's website, you'll find various options there on how to access the film. V13 is an original film, but based on a play. The play was called Vienna 13, written by a Lacanian psychoanalyst, and has been adapted to film by Richard and directed by Richard. So Richard, welcome back to Lacan in Scotland.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you for joining us. The film itself, Richard, actually, let's start with a bit of context for the viewers. Can you tell us a little bit, just give us a little bit of context of the film, a little summary of the film from your perspective as the film's director?
It's about two young men in Vienna just before the First World War, on the eve of the First World War. And they're both looking for a direction. They're both kind of lost, you could say. And one is sent to Freud to do an analysis, referred to Freud to do an analysis. And his symptom, of which he's very embarrassed because he comes from a very good family, he's educated, and he knows better, but he feels an impulsive revulsion towards Jews. And Freud accepts him to do an analysis. And then the other young man, who's not anti-Semitic at the beginning. If anything, he's very focused. He does have a obsession with Greeks, who he can't stand, and feels the whole presence of Greek culture in Vienna is kind of a pollution, a degradation, a degrading of German culture. He's vegetarian. He loves animals. His name is Adolf, and by the end, well, we all know where he assumes his name. In the film, by the end, he assumes his last name, Hitler. And so you have this kind of chiasmatic structure, like an X, where one goes from being lost and not at all focused upon Jews to being the creator of the Nazi Weltanschauung. And the other young man, I would say, abandons his friendship, his hatred, and through this analysis with Freud. And Alain Didier-Weil, who wrote the play, was a Lacanian psychoanalyst analyzed by Lacan, Jacques Lacan. So I've done two films by Lacanian psychoanalysts analyzed by Lacan. This was the first one. I began this around, I'd say, 2007, 2008, working on this with Alain. We had done another film which did well, based on a play he had written. No, excuse me, based on the only screenplay he wrote, which he hadn't finished. He hadn't been able to finish it. So I took it, I finished it, I reset it in New York. It had Frank Langella, Elliot Gould, Laura Herring, and it did well. We won prizes, and it did well. I mean, it hit the financial crisis, and that kind of sank it, but generally it did well. And we loved the experience. I think Alain was a very happy time in his life. He passed away in 2017. And I saw a staged reading of his play, of an English translation of his French play, Vienna 1913, in New York. And I was struck by it. And I've thought a lot since then about why. And I persisted for a very long time to make this film. And in the midst of the years and years and years of developing this film, I made Adieu Lacan. So Adieu Lacan, which was came out first, in fact, was made in the midst of the long preparation for this film. It has Alan Cumming as Sigmund Freud, who is in many ways the prominent figure in it. And Alain was I mix up Alain and Alan all the time. But Alain was a psychoanalyst, and I think that was his domain. And I think because of that, Alan Cumming, who of course is a Scottish actor, was very drawn to playing the role. I mean, I think he does an extraordinary job. And he stuck with this film for a very long time. I mean, and he had a lot to do with why we were finally, able to make it.
Okay, that's really interesting. Just for context for viewers who are not familiar with your previous film, Richard's previous film, as he says, was also concerns the psychoanalytic world. Has that very strong link with psychoanalysis, possibly even more so than V13 does. Both films are based on plays. Both films are written by people who were analyzed by Lacan and went on to become analysts themselves. There's a very strong connection. Do you see the two films as being, you're talking there how in terms of the chronology, they're kind of wrapped together, but do you see them as a pairing of films?
Well, in some ways, one is aware of audiences, and I loved doing Adieu Lacan. Of course, it came out during COVID, which was, very bad luck, but it was kind of good luck too, in that there were all, I've been interested in the work of Lacan, particularly clinical groups, going back to when I did a doctoral dissertation on the rise of mental health care in the States, and wrote on came out of a performance piece I did based on the records of my uncle, who had been a World War II veteran, had a psychotic break, spent 10 years in a psychiatric hospital, and then died. He was hit by a train, and he had been twice at least recommended for a lobotomy. And I did a performance piece using his records. And I was so struck that though they were intended to tell a story about him, they also told a story about the storytellers and that period of time. And then I became aware that it was this pivotal moment in the United States for the rise of mental health care around treating the veterans. The veterans were a non-stigmatized patient population. So the formation of the National Institute of Mental Health, the first Mental Health Act, all those come immediately after the Second World War. And I was working with an anthropologist, and I brought in all these big old books on schizophrenia from the 50s. And he was like, whoa, it's great you're reading all those books, but it'd be really good if you met people who did this. You'd have a very different feel for it. So I started to work with different clinical groups. I volunteered at an outpatient center for kind of chronically, severely mentally ill, most of them diagnosed with one form of psychosis or another. And I assistant directed a theater program where we did plays that they were referred to as clients, which the clients created. And we did one called Room 13A, which was about a drug that cured all mental illness, but it had one side effect. It brought back the dead. And I thought that was very interesting in terms of where they were and what was offered and wasn't. But I got to know all these different clinical groups, and for the most part, those were very informative but brief. But the one that stuck was a Lacanian psychoanalytic group in New York. And I had been reading Lacan going back to when I had been living in Paris in the 80s, and someone had asked me to write a version of the Antigone, and I had read that day about the death of Laurence Bataille, the stepdaughter of Lacan. And it had mentioned the Antigone in that Lacan had brought the portion of his seventh seminar on the Antigone to her. She was imprisoned for her involvement in the resistance to the French occupation of Algeria. And so, and my French wasn't good, but my Greek was pretty good. So that was my introduction. And I mean, I just took it as a kind of sign because I was, again, focused on Antigone, and here this came and everything. And so it predated the performance piece I did in New York, and it's continued ever since. I mean, I still belong to this Lacanian psychoanalytic group, most of which are clinicians. I've always been interested in the practice. I mean, I'm a big reader of theory, but I think I'm the only one who's not planning to be a psychoanalyst. Well, I won't say the only one, but there are a few of us. I'm the only filmmaker in the room, and but I think I've been drawn to, and this goes back to Alan in a way. He was someone who was really passionate about theater and music and the arts, and so when I met him after he gave a talk at Après Coup, we just kind of hit it off. And I've always thought of filmmaking as a practice, and so that for me is obviously it's not the same as the practice of psychoanalysis, but it involves, it's just very interesting to have a practice, I would say. There's a moment of kind of letting go of knowing, you could say, and just through the work, through the performance, that's how you continue, so that was how I've stayed involved with the work of Lacan.